The first scream cut across the Harbor Mercy waterfront fundraiser like a torn cable. Champagne flutes froze halfway to lips. A string quartet stumbled into silence. At the curb beside a row of polished luxury vehicles, a black and tan Belgian Malinois launched from Reed Cooper's left side in a blur of muscle and intent, landed hard on all four paws, and planted himself in front of a midnight blue SUV. Odin didn't bark. He didn't need to. His lips peeled back from white teeth, ears knifed forward, hackles up, eyes locked under the vehicle as if he could see through steel. He stood so still he looked carved there, a warning in fur and bone. "Dog! Somebody get that dog!" a woman shouted. Phones rose instantly. One man in a linen suit stepped backward so quickly he spilled his drink down the front of his shirt. Two private security guards hustled toward the curb, palms out, talking over each other. "Sir, control your animal. Animal control is on the way." At least 6 people pointed at Reed, like he'd unholstered a weapon in the middle of a children's fundraiser. In a way, he had. Reed didn't move too fast. Fast made civilians panic, and panic made bad decisions. He took one step forward, shoulders squared, hands visible, voice low but carrying. "Odin. Platz. Down." The Malinois lowered, chest to pavement, but his growl deepened and his gaze never shifted from beneath the SUV. Reed felt the old pulse in his neck, the one that belonged to operations, not galas. He'd worn a blazer over a plain dark T-shirt to keep donors comfortable. He still stood like a man expecting incoming. Retired Navy SEAL, former combat handler. Now he trained working dogs for search teams, veterans, and the occasional police department that could afford to admit it needed outside help. He had come tonight because Harbor Mercy's pediatric wing sponsored his K9 demos every spring. This event had balloons shaped like sea creatures and miniature crab cakes arranged like art. And his dog was in threat posture. "Reed!" called Melanie Griggs, Harbor Mercy's development director, moving toward him with brittle calm. "What is happening?" He didn't answer her. He was watching Odin's breathing, short, controlled, no chaotic spikes. Not fear, not confusion, purpose. 3 young men in expensive jackets hovered behind the SUV's rear quarter panel, trying and failing to look offended instead of rattled. Reed recognized all 3 by face, if not by virtue. Blake Halbrook, son of the city's loudest developer. Evan Voss, son of Harbor Mercy's medical director. Chase Danner, son of Police Commissioner Danner. They'd been laughing with each other minutes ago near the silent auction table, loud enough for everyone to hear. Now Blake jabbed a finger toward Odin. "That thing came at us," he shouted. "Put it down!" Odin's head snapped 1 inch toward Blake's movement, then back under the vehicle. Growl constant. Calculated. Reed knew that sound. He hadn't heard it since a dusty alley outside Fallujah when Odin's predecessor had pinned a bomber behind a wall no human had checked. The memory hit like a cracked rib. Heat, shouting, hesitation. The child in the doorway he reached 1 second too late. Guilt didn't fade with retirement. It just learned to stand at ease until provoked. A security guard reached for his radio. "Dispatch, we need—" "No," Reed said, command voice cutting through the noise. Several heads turned before they could stop themselves. "Nobody approaches this vehicle. Nobody reaches under it. You," he nodded to the guard, "set a perimeter 10 feet now." The guard bristled at being ordered by a civilian. Then he looked at Odin's posture and obeyed anyway. Melanie lowered her voice. "Reed, if this is a liability situation—" "It is," he said. "Just not the one you think." He moved to Odin's flank and dropped to one knee, palm resting briefly against the dog's shoulder. Steady, controlled heat under his hand. He angled down, following Odin's line of sight beneath the SUV. At first he saw darkness, concrete dust, the glint of an axle. Then a sneaker, Small, mud-streaked, trembling. Easy, Reed said, and now he was talking to whoever was under there, not the crowd. Hey, you're okay. Don't move yet. A boy curled tight against the chassis, maybe 10 years old, knees tucked to chest like he could fold himself out of existence. His sleeve was dark with blood near the elbow. In both hands he clutched a cracked smartphone so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes were huge and glassy, fixed somewhere beyond Reed's shoulder, not trusting the face above him. The entire fundraiser inhaled at once. "Oh my God! There's a kid. Is he hurt?" Reed shifted his body to block the crowd's view as much as he could. "Odin, Blybe. Stay." The dog didn't blink. "Kid," Reed said gently, "my name is Reed. I'm not with them." At the word them, the boy flinched so hard his head struck the undercarriage. Behind Reed, Blake's voice sharpened. "That's Jasper. He was trying door handles in the parking lot. We caught him. Your mutt freaked out." Evan piled on instantly. "He attacked us. Everybody saw." "Yeah," Chase said, louder now that uniforms were arriving. "Witnesses. This is on camera." Reed looked up just enough to see 2 city officers, pushing through the crowd, hands near holsters out of habit, more than intention. Chase noticed them, and visibly relaxed, chin lifting in practiced authority that did not belong to him. "Officers," Chase said, "I'm Commissioner Danner's son. This dog is dangerous." One officer glanced at the dog, then at the boy under the SUV, then at Chase. "Sir, step back." Chase didn't. Neither did Blake or Evan. Under the vehicle, Jasper's breathing turned ragged when their shoes edged closer. Odin's growl rolled deeper, a warning that vibrated through pavement and bone. "Back," Reed said, still kneeling. "All 3 of you. Now." Blake laughed, thin and mean. "You don't get to order us around, Rambo." Reed ignored him and put his focus where it mattered. "Jasper," he said softly, using the name on purpose, "I need you to slide the phone toward me." The boy shook his head once, violent and terrified. "No." "Okay," Reed said. "Then show me." Jasper's hands trembled so badly Reed thought he'd dropped the device. He swiped through a spiderweb screen, fumbled, tried again. At last, he turned it outward. Video. Shaky footage from a low angle, maybe recorded from behind a cart. Timestamp from 23 minutes earlier. Industrial hallway. A woman in blue janitorial scrubs struggling while 2 men dragged her through a loading bay door. She kicked once. A one-man slapped her. The camera lurched as if the person filming had ducked. The woman's ID badge flashed for a frame. Marisol Ruiz. Jasper thrust the phone farther, urgency overcoming fear. His lips moved, but no words came. When Chase stepped forward to snatch the phone, Odin exploded upward with a bark so explosive that Chase stumbled back into Evan, swearing. "That's assault!" Evan shouted, clutching his chest like he'd been struck. "Stay back from the child," Reed said, voice flat as steel. An officer finally moved between the trio and the curb. "Nobody touches anybody." "Sir," he said to Reed, "can you secure your dog?" "He is secure," Reed said, "and he's the only reason this kid is still reachable." The second officer crouched at a safe distance from the SUV. "Hey, buddy, can you come out for me?" Jasper curled tighter. Reed glanced at the blood on the sleeve, at the way the boy's gaze snapped only to Odin and back. "He's in shutdown," Reed said quietly. "If you force this, he bolts or bites from fear. Let me." The officer hesitated, then nodded once. Reed lowered his voice even further, almost the tone he used with bomb dogs in storms. "Jasper, I'm going to move back 2 feet. Odin stays with me. No one else comes close. You can crawl to my side only, understand?" A long second. Then Jasper nodded, barely. Reed shifted back. Odin mirrored him, still between the boy and the crowd. Jasper slid out inch by inch, one arm tucked to his ribs, shoes scraping concrete. When he emerged fully, he stood, swayed, then reached blindly toward Odin's collar like it was a handhold on a cliff. Odin stilled, allowing the contact. The crowd filmed everything. By the time paramedics loaded Jasper into an ambulance with Reed riding in back and Odin trotting beside the gurney until the doors shut, the story had already split in two across social media. In one version, a vicious military dog attacked 3 innocent young men at a charity event. In the other, a K-9 blocked 3 powerful heirs from a bleeding child hiding under their SUV. By nightfall, the first version had better lawyers. At 8:12 p.m., Reed received formal notice by email. Expedited petition to classify Odin as a dangerous animal, pending immediate municipal review, filed through a city attorney's office that moved faster for this than it ever had for missing person alerts. At 8:30, Harbor Mercy released a brief statement calling the fundraiser incident an unfortunate misunderstanding involving an agitated minor with a known history of behavioral instability. Known history. Reed read the line twice, jaw flexing. At 9:05, a local legal firm representing Hallbrook Development issued a preemptive media memo describing Reed as a disgruntled former operative prone to escalation who had inserted himself into an active security situation for personal exposure. At 9:40, the police report summary listed Jasper as a possible vehicle burglary suspect and omitted the loading bay video pending authentication. At 10:03, a detective Reed knew from old training days called from a blocked number and spoke in a voice too careful to be casual. Off the record? Let the families handle it. You push this, you'll lose the dog before sunrise. Reed stood in the dark of his training yard while he listened, Odin pressed against his knee, night wind carrying brine from the harbor. He watched floodlights sweep the chain-link perimeter and felt the familiar war between restraint and fury start in his chest. He chose restraint first. He always tried. By midnight, he had filed incident supplements, evidence preservation requests, and chain of custody notices for every camera feed within a quarter-mile of Harbor Mercy's loading docks and parking lot. He uploaded copies to 3 separate drives and couriered hard copies to an attorney he trusted from veterans' court cases. At 12:47 a.m., he learned the fundraiser lot surveillance had malfunctioned during the relevant window. At 1:15, 2 catering staff who had agreed to statements texted that they remembered it differently now and would not be participating. At 2:02, Jasper's chart was amended to note acute stress response, possible confabulation. Confabulation. For a child who had handed over video. Reed drove to a narrow apartment above a laundromat where Jasper's aunt, Lucia, had taken him after discharge. She opened the door on a safety chain and didn't release it until Odin sat and lowered his head, patient as stone. Inside, Jasper sat at the kitchen table, in an oversized hoodie, elbow bandaged, a tablet in front of him with picture cards for communication. He didn't speak, not to police, not to doctors, not to his aunt unless he had to, and then only in whispers she pretended not to notice were disappearing again. When Reed entered, Jasper's shoulders climbed toward his ears. Odin walked in, circled once, and lay at the boy's feet. Jasper exhaled. Lucia wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand as if angry at tears for existing. They keep calling, she said. Hospital people. Someone from the commissioner's office. They say my sister is unstable, probably ran off, maybe using again. Her voice cracked on the last word. She has 9 years sober. 9. Marisol didn't run, Reed said. He looked at Jasper. You showed me what happened. Jasper tapped his tablet, selected icons with careful fingers. Mom. Taken. Blue door. Men. Then, after a pause, dog safe. Reed swallowed once. Yeah, he said. He is. No. He realized a second later the card order wasn't about Odin. It was instruction. Dog, keep me safe. There it was. The stakes in a 10-year-old's clipped sequence. If Odin went, Jasper lost the only thing his nervous system currently trusted. If Jasper was discredited, Marisol disappeared into paperwork and rumor. If Reed backed off, 3 young men with inherited power learned exactly how cheap a working-class woman and her child were in a city built on donor plaques. And under all that sat a quieter stake, one Reed didn't name out loud. Promises. In the teams, promises were simple. You bring people home. You protect the vulnerable. You do not look away because the enemy wears a suit instead of a rifle. He had failed that once, years ago, in a place no one at Harbor Mercy could point to on a map. The boy he hadn't reached still showed up in dreams with dust in his hair and accusation in his eyes. He wasn't losing this one to bureaucracy. At 3:11 a.m., Reed spread case notes across Lucia's table, while Jasper slept on the couch with one hand buried in Odin's fur. He listed risks on a yellow legal pad like mission planning. Immediate risk, Marisol's life. Legal risk, Odin's seizure and euthanasia if labeled dangerous. Credibility risk, Jasper framed as delinquent, testimony invalidated. Operational risk, local channels compromised by family influence. He circled the last item twice. Lucia watched him from the doorway. Can we trust the police? Reed took longer than he wanted to answer. Some of them, he said. Not all of them. She nodded like she already knew. Outside, tires hissed on wet pavement. A car idled too long beneath the window, then moved on. Reed noted plate digits from memory reflex and wrote them down. At dawn, he walked Odin in the alley behind the building while gulls screamed over the waterfront and delivery trucks rattled toward Harbor Mercy. His phone buzzed with 14 unread messages, 6 media requests, and 1 voicemail from the city animal control office scheduling Odin's behavioral evaluation for that afternoon. Fast-tracked. Of course it was. Reed stared east where the sun lifted behind half-finished Marina towers stamped with Halbrook banners. Glass and steel catching morning light like something clean. Beside him, Odin went rigid for a second, nose into the wind, then looked back at Reed for direction. Reed clipped a small camera under his own jacket, checked the spare batteries in his pocket, and texted one number he hadn't used in years. A former teammate who still believed in evidence over politics. Need eyes, need clean chain. Child witness. Possible abduction. The reply came before he reached the stairwell. On my way. Reed looked up at Lucia's window where Jasper's small silhouette hovered behind the curtain, watching the street, one hand resting on Odin's chew toy like a talisman. This isn't a misunderstanding, Reed said quietly, to the dog, to himself, to the waking city that had already chosen convenience over truth. It's a hunt. Odin's ears flicked forward, ready. Odin's ears flicked forward, ready. Reed pushed open the stairwell door and moved back into Lucia's apartment, locking both bolts behind him. He didn't announce what he was thinking. He didn't need to. The place already felt like a perimeter, not a home. Lucia stood at the sink with cold coffee in her hand, watching him for answers he didn't have yet. Jasper remained near the curtain, not peeking now, just listening to the street with that rigid stillness frightened kids learn too early. Reed kept his voice low. No one opens the door unless you hear my voice first. Even then, chain stays on. If you have to leave, call me first. Lucia nodded. I was never going to open it. His phone buzzed. Animal control again, voicemail this time. He played it on speaker. Mr. Cooper, this is Officer Trin with Municipal Animal Services. Reminder, behavioral assessment for Odin Cooper is scheduled today at 1400 hours under emergency petition authority. Failure to appear may result in immediate seizure. Emergency petition authority for a dog that had guarded a bleeding child. Reed ended the call, then looked at Jasper. We go together this afternoon. You, me, Odin, your aunt. No surprises. Jasper's fingers moved on the tablet. Safe. Dog. With. Yeah, Reed said. With us. A knock hit the door. 3 short, 2 long. Reed moved to the frame, checked the peephole, then opened with the chain still latched. A broad-shouldered man with close-cropped gray hair held both hands up, empty palms and a look that said he was already done with the city before breakfast. Nate Rourke, he said through the gap. You texted. Reed unlatched the chain and let him in. Nate was one of the few men Reed trusted to show up fast and ask questions second. Former teammate. Former everything, really, until he turned that same obsessive precision toward private investigations when the Navy chapter ended. He carried a hard case, 2 body cams, and an expression that sharpened when he saw Jasper's bandage. Kid witness? Nate asked quietly. Reed nodded once. And a missing mother. Nate set the case on the table and opened it. Then we do this clean. Record every handoff. Duplicate every file before we submit. If they bury evidence, we make them bury all of it in 3 jurisdictions. He clipped a camera onto Reed's jacket and handed Lucia a small panic button linked to his phone. Press this if anyone knocks and won't leave. For the first time since the fundraiser, Lucia looked like she might breathe for half a second. By 10:30, they were at Harbor Mercy's security office, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, 2 administrators and 1 hospital attorney already waiting. Reed set Jasper's cracked phone in a tamper bag on the table, then set 2 exact digital copies beside it on labeled drives. The attorney gave a thin smile. You understand, this may not be admissible due to chain irregularities. Nate clicked his own pen camera to obvious mode and placed it in plain sight. Chain starts now, he said. Timestamp 10:34. Evidence submission includes original handset, SHA verified clones, and sworn recovery statement from witness and responder. The security chief avoided eye contact. Our loading bay camera bank had a service interruption. Interesting, Nate said. Because we pulled your maintenance ticket logs this morning. No service call. The attorney's smile vanished. How did you obtain internal logs? Legally, Nate said. Question is, why did your system lose exactly 27 minutes between 6:02 and 6:29 p.m.? No one answered. At the precinct an hour later, the desk lieutenant accepted Reed's report addendum without looking at him. When Reed requested immediate BOLO expansion for Marisol Ruiz as probable abduction victim, the lieutenant flipped pages like he was searching for a reason to say no. We have no confirmed kidnapping, he said. Current status is missing person pending welfare check. Reed leaned in just enough for the man to see he wasn't leaving. There is video of her being dragged into a loading bay. There is video of an altercation, the lieutenant corrected. Nate spoke before Reed could. You're on record minimizing evidence tied to a child witness and potential felony abduction. You sure that's your final language? Lieutenant stamped the paperwork harder than necessary. Detective unit will review. Outside, Reed exhaled through his nose, jaw tight enough to ache. The old version of himself, the one built for doors and decisive force, kept reaching for control that didn't exist in daylight. He shoved it back down where training had taught it to sit. At 1:50, they walked into Municipal Animal Services. The hearing room smelled like bleach and anxiety. A city behavior specialist sat with a clipboard. A hearing officer in a navy blazer reviewed files. 2 local reporters waited in the back, cameras primed. So did Chase Danner, wearing righteous outrage like it had been tailored. And a Halbrook attorney with cufflinks that probably cost more than Lucia's rent. "Mr. Cooper," the officer began, "this is an emergency temperament review regarding allegations your dog threatened civilians and lunged to attack." Reed gestured to Jasper, who stood close to Odin's shoulder, not touching yet, just anchored by proximity. "He threatened men approaching an injured child. That's called guarding." The specialist looked at Odin. "We'll run controlled stimuli." They did. Loud noises, sudden movements, passed by strangers, dropped metal pans, fake argument escalation. Odin held steady through all of it, eyes tracking, body loose but attentive. Then Chase ignored instructions and stepped directly toward Jasper. Odin moved once, clean, fast, decisive, placing his body between Chase and the boy. Low warning rumble. No contact. The room froze. The specialist lifted a hand. "Stop right there. Subject dog displayed targeted protective positioning, not generalized aggression." Chase threw up his hands. "He just threatened me." "You entered a restricted testing lane after explicit warning," she said flatly. "That result is on you." The hearing officer scribbled notes, expression unreadable. "Interim ruling. Dog is not to be seized pending full evidentiary hearing. However, until case disposition, Odin must remain under handler control in public and wear visual service markings. Not a win, not a loss. A narrow corridor." Reed took it. Outside, reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Cooper, are you exploiting this case for publicity? Is Jasper Ruiz involved in theft? Do you dispute hospital statements on his behavioral history?" Reed kept walking, one hand on Odin's harness. "Ask me again when Marisol Ruiz is found," he said, and didn't stop. That night, things escalated. Reed had just finished sweeping Lucia's block from a parked position when his phone lit up with his kennel alarm. Zone 3, rear access, then fire suppression triggered. He drove hard across town, Nate on speaker, and already calling fire dispatch. Flames licked out of the roof vent when Reed arrived. Not an inferno, but deliberate. Fast-burning accelerant at the back fence, tossed through cut chain link. Sprinklers had contained the worst of it. 2 runs were charred, 1 storage room was blackened. No dogs lost because Reed boarded none overnight without staff. Someone knew his schedule. Someone wanted him scrambling. Fire investigators called it suspicious before the embers cooled. Reed stood in smoke and wet ash, Odin at heel, and watched a man in city utilities boots photograph the scene without giving his name. By the time Nate tried to track him, the man was gone. At 2:14 a.m., Lucia called, words breaking apart in gasps. "Someone shot the lock! Reed, the door!" He was there in 8 minutes. The apartment deadbolt was split clean, wood cratered around the latch. Not a full entry. A message. 1 round, maybe 2. Then footsteps down metal stairs, according to a neighbor who didn't see faces. Jasper sat on the kitchen floor in noise-canceling headphones. Knees up, tablet clutched to his chest. He wouldn't look at anyone except Odin, who lay pressed against his shins like a weighted blanket with teeth. Reed crouched, forced his voice steady. "Hey, buddy. You did good. Stayed inside." Jasper tapped with shaking fingers. "Bad men know." Reed nodded. No lies left to offer. "Yeah, they do." Nate, standing by the damaged frame, spoke quietly to Lucia. "You can't stay here." Lucia swallowed hard. "Where then?" Reed answered before fear could. My training facility office has reinforced doors and cameras eye control. You move now. No one argued. They left before dawn in 2 vehicles, lights off, alternating routes 3 times. Reed watched mirrors the whole drive and hated how familiar it felt. Protect the asset. Assume surveillance. Trust pattern breaks over comfort. At the facility, he settled Lucia in the upstairs bunk room, then made coffee so strong it tasted like punishment. Jasper sat at the edge of the mat room with Odin, arranging picture cards into strict lines. Mom, work, blue door, men, phone, hide, then reshuffling, then lining them again. Reed sat across from him, cross-legged, hands open. Do you know where your mom kept things? A locker? A bag? Jasper stared at the cards. No response. Reed didn't push. Pushing broke kids in shutdown. Instead, he built routine. Breakfast at 700, walk at 7:30, quiet drills with Odin at 800, where Jasper could give simple hand cues and watch immediate, predictable outcomes. Sit, down, touch, good, again. The boy's breathing slowed during commands, as if certainty could be relearned 1 rep at a time. By afternoon, the city's narrative hardened anyway. A local segment ran with the Chiron, veteran trainer under scrutiny after gala incident. The panel debated whether trauma-induced misperception might explain Jasper's video. Halbrook Development announced a new community safety initiative. Harbor Mercy's board sent a memo praising Evan Voss for cooperation with authorities. Witnesses from the fundraiser continued evaporating. One caterer moved out of state overnight. Another suddenly retained counsel and claimed she had consumed several drinks before seeing anything. At 5:40 p.m., Detective Bell, the same voice from the block number, called again. You've made your point, Bell said. Back off before this gets uglier. Reed stared through the facility glass at Jasper, tracing Odin's ear edge with careful fingers. It already got ugly. I'm trying to keep you from losing everything. Then find Marisol. Bell paused. Some doors don't open from the outside, Cooper. Reed ended the call. That evening, when Jasper refused dinner, Reed set the plate down and sat nearby in silence. The boy finally tapped his tablet and turned it around. No police? No hospital? Odin, yes? Reed? Maybe. Reed almost laughed at the brutal honesty of kids. Maybe works, he said. We can build, maybe. Jasper studied him for a long second, then nodded once and leaned into Odin's shoulder until his eyes closed. Reed remained there long after both were asleep, listening to the building settle, old guilt scraping at him like sand in a wound. He had spent years telling clients that discipline was choosing action over emotion. Tonight, discipline meant not driving to 3 rich families' homes and letting rage decide the next hour. He chose action. At 11:06 p.m., he and Nate mapped every known connection on the whiteboard in the training room. Halbrook contracts, Harbor Mercy loading docks, Danner family influence over patrol assignments, timeline gaps, deleted footage windows, and one stubborn center point labeled Marisol. Last verified 1807, loading bay. Nate circled it. We're chasing symptoms, he said. Need source data. Reed looked at the sleeping boy through the office glass. Source might be him. The break came at sunrise, quiet as a held breath. Jasper woke early and found Reed in the mat room cleaning harness buckles. No greeting, no words. He just sat down, opened the tablet, and began selecting symbols faster than before. Mom, key, mop, locker, fish sticker, B2. Reed frowned. Basement level 2? Jasper tapped yes, then hospital, then not front, then trash elevator. Lucia appeared in the doorway, robe pulled tight. What is he saying? Reed was already standing. He's given us a route. By 8:30, they were parked 2 blocks from Harbor Mercy's service entrance in Nate's unmarked SUV. Reed wore a maintenance jacket borrowed from a friend in facilities. Nate carried a clipboard and looked exactly like a contractor nobody remembered seeing before. Lucia stayed back with Odin and kept Jasper calm in the rear seat until Reed signaled. They entered through the waste corridor with bins rolling and compactors thudding. No one looked twice. Hospitals taught people to ignore what they didn't want to process. Basement level 2 was colder than upstairs. Fluorescent lights flickering over cinder block walls and old renovation signs. The janitorial lockers sat behind a badge door Nate opened with a cloned temporary access card, acquired through entirely legal but creatively timed methods. Inside, rows of dented metal doors, most open, some padlocked. Jasper stepped in, breathing quick but steady, and pointed to a locker with a faded cartoon fish sticker near the hinge. "Mom's," Lucia whispered. The lock wasn't forced. Reed tried Marisol's employee number from her badge frame in the video still. No luck. Jasper touched the keypad, entered 4 digits without hesitation. It clicked. Inside were folded spare scrubs, lavender soap, a rosary wrapped around a photo strip of Jasper at different ages, and a mop head package sealed with gray tape. Too neat, too deliberate. Reed slit the tape with his pocket knife. A second phone slid into his palm, heavier than expected, attached to a slim power bank and a card with handwritten instructions in Spanish. Nate read over his shoulder. "If open, connect to Wi-Fi. Do not reset. Upload automatic each 6 hours." They looked at each other. "Smart," Nate said. "Dead man redundancy." He powered it carefully. The lock screen showed no personal photo, just a black background and one app pinned front and center, Archivo. Nate tethered the device through a sterile hotspot and mirrored the storage before opening anything. "If this wipes, we still have image," he muttered. The app requested a passphrase. Jasper typed with one finger, "Odin." Denied. He tried again. Jasper. Denied. Lucia wiped her eyes. "Try Miguel," she whispered, like saying the name hurt. Jasper entered Miguelruiz. The screen unlocked. Folders populated by date and time. Dozens of clips, some seconds long, some several minutes, hidden camera angles, loading docks, pharmacy receiving, renovation staging rooms, parking levels, model units in unfinished marina towers. They opened one from 3 weeks earlier. Blake Halbrook stood with 2 men in contractor vests beside crates marked medical supply. He laughed while one vest guy peeled off a false label revealing controlled opioid stock tags. Another clip, Evan Voss in a hospital admin office signing adjusted inventory sheets, then handing envelopes to a man Reed recognized from Harbor Mercy procurement. Another, Chase Danner in plain clothes flashing his father's old badge wallet to a patrol sergeant, directing theft report classification to specific neighborhoods near the waterfront. Another, a meeting table with site maps overlaid on eviction notices, names of overdose victims' families circled in red, Halbrook's voice in the background, push nuisance complaints, code enforcement, whatever. Get them out before permit phase. Lucia covered her mouth. Dios mío. Nate was already duplicating files to encrypted drives, face gone hard. "This isn't one assault," he said. "It's an operation." Reed felt the room narrow. All the pressure, all the speed to bury a kid and kill a dog. It made grim sense now. Jasper hadn't just seen a crime. He'd stumbled onto machinery. There was one final file, time-stamped less than an hour before the fundraiser. Marisol appeared close to camera, breathing fast, face bruised at the cheekbone. She must have propped the phone inside a supply cabinet. The angle was tight and dim. Behind her, muffled voices and a metal door slam. She spoke in Spanish, clear despite fear. Si algo me pasa, busquen a Cooper. Mi hermano dijo que él cumple sus promesas. If anything happens to me, find Cooper. My brother said he keeps his promises. Reed didn't move. Marisol glanced off camera as if listening, then looked back and added one name in a whisper that hit him harder than any punch he'd taken in uniform. Miguel Ruiz. The mat room, the fundraiser, the city, all of it vanished for a beat under the weight of memory. Desert wind, rotor wash, a young interpreter with blood on his sleeve, pulling Reed behind a wall while rounds cracked overhead. Miguel shouting coordinates, translating pleas, refusing to leave civilians behind even when the exfil window collapsed. Reed had believed Miguel died after that final split evacuation. He stared at Marisol's frozen frame and understood with brutal clarity why Odin had chosen that curb, that SUV, that child. Not random, never random. A promise had found him again. A promise had found him again. Reed snapped back to the locker room when Nate swore under his breath. Cooper, look. In the top corner of Marisol's phone, a tiny icon blinked red, then steady amber. Transmission active. Tripwire, Nate said. Either heartbeat ping or unauthorized access alert. We just told somebody this device is alive. The fluorescent buzz seemed to get louder. Down the hall, a door slammed. Reed moved fast but controlled. Airplane mode, Faraday wrap. Nate had already killed the connection and slid the phone into a shielding pouch. He handed Lucia one encrypted drive, Reed another, and kept a third in his vest. No single point of failure. If one of us gets grabbed, the data survives. Jasper tugged Reed's sleeve, eyes wide. We're leaving, Reed said. They came out through the waste corridor into a knot of motion that hadn't been there 20 minutes earlier. 2 hospital security carts, one marked Patrol SUV near the loading bay, and a man in a suit speaking into his cuff like he was in a bad spy movie. The suit clocked them and turned his head too quickly. Nate didn't look at him. Left. Dumpster lane. They split exactly as planned without discussing it. Nate peeled toward the contractor lot with the clipboard, walking like he had nowhere urgent to be. Reed moved Lucia and Jasper through the alley's shadow line, one hand on Jasper's shoulder, the other near Odin's harness clip. Odin tracked everyone, calm and lethal. By the time they reached Nate's SUV, Reed's phone was vibrating nonstop. Unknown number. Unknown number. Unknown number. Then a text from Detective Bell. You triggered them. Do not go home. Another message hit before Reed could answer. This one from a city number. Emergency child welfare. Order issued. Jasper Ruiz to be placed in protective medical custody pending investigation. Lucia made a small sound like she'd been punched. Medical custody? At Harbor Mercy? Reed didn't lie. Probably. A third alert followed immediately. Municipal Animal Control. Revised petition. Immediate hold request for K9. Odin, based on new evidence of public threat behavior. New evidence, manufactured fast enough to still smell like toner ink. Nate slid into the driver's seat and tore open an energy bar without eating it. They're hitting all pressure points at once. Boy, dog, chain of custody. They don't need to win in court tonight. They just need to scatter us. Reed looked at Jasper in the rear seat, knees tight, tablet clutched so hard the case creaked. The whole thing they had built in 48 hours, routine, trust, a sliver of safety, was being stripped with signatures and seals. If they got Jasper into protective care, he disappeared into controlled narratives. If they seized Odin, Jasper lost his anchor and Reed lost his partner. At the exact moment, everything went kinetic. If they tainted the evidence chain, Marisol became a rumor. Stakes were no longer abstract. They were names. Where? Nate asked. Reed answered without hesitation. State Office of Public Integrity. We go over local heads now. Nate nodded once and drove. They made it 3 blocks from the state annex before the trap closed. 2 patrol cruisers boxed the intersection ahead. Another slid in behind. No lights, just positioning. Precise, intentional. Don't run, Nate said quietly. Running makes their story true. Reed scanned badges as officers approached. City uniforms, not state. Wrong jurisdiction for the stop they were about to claim. A sergeant rapped the window. Driver, engine off. All occupants visible. Nate complied, hands high on the wheel. The sergeant leaned down and looked past Nate straight at Jasper. We're executing an emergency welfare transfer order. Child comes with us. Lucia's hand shot out, gripping Jasper's hoodie. No. Reed kept his tone even. Order copy. The sergeant held up a paper through the glass for less than a second. Not long enough to read, just long enough to establish pretense. No blind transfer, Reed said. State social worker present, body cam active, receiving facility named. Step out of the vehicle. On the sidewalk across from them, 2 men in plain clothes appeared as if conjured. One was hospital legal counsel from this morning. The other was Animal Control Officer Trin, face tight, holding a secondary form. Trin avoided Reed's eyes. Mr. Cooper, pursuant to emergency hold, the K-9 is to be surrendered now. She lifted the packet enough for him to catch the stamped header, an e-sign block. Emergency Judicial Amendment. Temporary override of interim non-seizure order, citing newly filed incident evidence pending full hearing. For one dangerous heartbeat, Reed considered refusing everything and forcing movement through steel and timing the way he used to. He could probably break the box, maybe. And then what? High-speed flight with a traumatized child in back, guns drawn, headlines written before sunset. He shut that door in his head. Nate, he said softly. Record everything. Already rolling. Reed opened his door slowly and stepped out, palms visible. Odin exited on command and sat at heel, body tense but obedient. Officer Trin's voice shook despite her effort to steady it. Please release the lead. No, Jasper whispered from inside the SUV. First spoken word in hours, then louder, cracking. No. Odin. Reed looked back through the glass. Eyes on me, buddy. Jasper was crying soundlessly now, hands slamming against the window. Lucia was shaking beside him, fury and terror braided together. The sergeant moved toward the rear door. Nate said sharply, You touched that kid without verified order on camera, and you buy yourself federal discovery. It bought them 40 seconds. Then someone higher up made a call because the sergeant's radio barked, he swore, and changed tactic. Fine. Dog first. Reed crouched by Odin, forehead briefly touching fur between the ears. Kennel command, he whispered. Temporary. Odin's amber eyes held his, waiting for the real command underneath the words. This is not surrender, Reed said under his breath. This is retrieval delay. He unclipped the lead and handed it over. Odin didn't resist. He just looked back once as they guided him toward the transport van. And Reed felt the loss like a physical tear. Not solved, not fixable now. Gone. By the time the convoy finally dispersed, they had not taken Jasper, Nate's cameras, Lucia's screaming insistence on a judge-signed transfer, and one lucky bystander live stream had forced retreat on that front. But Nate was cuffed and loaded into a cruiser on a fabricated charge of impersonating a hospital contractor. During the vehicle pull, an officer reached into the center console cache, recovered an additional encrypted drive, and logged it under Nate's arrest inventory after conferring with the sergeant. 2 evidence drives went with him. The original Marisol phone was seized as stolen institutional property, and Odin rode away in municipal quarantine. Reed stood in the exhaust haze with empty hands while Lucia held Jasper in the back seat and whispered his name over and over like she could stitch him together by repetition. For the first time since the curb at Harbor Mercy, Reed wasn't sure he could keep his promise. They relocated to an old bait shop office Nate used near the docks, a place that smelled of salt, mildew, and machine oil. 1 lamp, metal desk, no signage. Reed spent an hour on calls that went nowhere. Emergency motions, veteran legal contacts, state intake lines, anyone who might pry Odin loose or get Nate in front of a real judge before evidence vanished into processing. Every answer was delay language, pending review. Tomorrow morning, submit through portal. Tomorrow morning was a luxury Marisol might not have. At 9:18 p.m., Lucia found him behind the bait shop building, standing under a busted floodlight with his hands braced on a rusted railing, staring at black water. She didn't speak immediately. Neither did he. When she finally did, her voice was hoarse. "I used to think if I planned enough, nothing bad could happen twice." Reed glanced at her. She kept looking out at the harbor. "When we were kids, Miguel was the one who made plans. Exit routes from every market. Backup keys, extra cash in a shoe. He'd joke that paranoia was just love with better logistics." A short, broken laugh. "Then he went overseas to help your team. Then he was gone. No body, no call, just gone." The words came faster, like something long dammed had cracked. Marisol stopped sleeping after that. She got sober anyway. She worked doubles anyway. She raised Jasper anyway. I watched her build this careful little life out of nothing, and still I kept waiting for it to collapse, because that's what life does to women like us in the city. Lucia pressed her palms to her eyes. Today, when they touched that door handle and said welfare transfer, I didn't see officers. I saw men with uniforms deciding our family's evidence to be moved. She turned to him then, and Reed saw raw fear under the anger. "I am so tired of being brave in rooms built for other people," she whispered. "I am tired of pretending I trust systems that only recognize us when we are useful or dead." He said nothing, because anything polished would insult the truth of it. Lucia drew a shaky breath. "And I'm scared of you, too. Not because you're dangerous." She shook her head quickly. "Because when you walk into a room, I believe things might actually change. I haven't let myself believe that in years. Belief is expensive." The confession hung between them, salt air and vulnerability and the soft thud of waves against pilings. Reed spoke quietly. "I don't need you fearless. I need you honest. That helps me more." Her eyes shone, but she didn't look away. "Honest? I don't know if we can win this." "Me neither," he said. That landed, maybe because it wasn't hero talk. Inside, Jasper tapped the window glass twice. Signal. Lucia wiped her face with both hands and straightened, but the mask wasn't fully back on. Some of the truth stayed visible, and oddly it made her seem steadier, not less. Before she turned to go inside, her fingers brushed Reed's wrist briefly, intentional. Not romance like fireworks. Something quieter. Consent to stand in the same storm. Jasper had spread maps across the desk. Printed satellite shots Nate kept in a tube for surveillance jobs. Harbor, hospital, marina district. He was placing icon stickers from his tablet onto the paper with intense concentration. Reed moved beside him. "Show me." Jasper pointed to 3 stickers already clustered on unfinished lots near Hallbrook's Marina Towers. Then he opened Marisol's cloud backup on the remaining hidden micro SD Nate's contingency copy, the one they hadn't found during the stop. A new file had uploaded 6 minutes earlier. No title, 11 seconds. Video opened on darkness, then a swing of light across concrete floors, designer mock-up furniture still in plastic, and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking black water studded with work lights. A female voice, gagged, muffled, men arguing. Blake's voice clear. "No more delays. We trade the kid's phone and drives tonight, or she goes in the pilings." Chase, lower. "My dad says state eyes are sniffing around. End it before sunrise." The clip cut. Lucia went white and gripped the desk edge hard enough her knuckles blanched. That was her. Reed's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Jasper's cracked handset, now somehow active again via cloud relay. Spoofed connection. He put it on speaker. Evan's voice came through, shaking with forced swagger. "You listening, Cooper? Bring what you stole. No cops, no feds, no hero dog. Midnight, Tower 3 model unit, 22nd floor." Reed kept his tone flat. "Proof of life." A slap sound. Marisol's choked cry in the background. Lucia made a strangled noise. Reed held up a hand without looking away from the phone. Evan continued. "You come alone-ish. You and one buddy if you're scared. Kid comes too. He verifies the unlock. No? Then she dies and your war mutt gets a needle anyway." Click. Silence dropped heavy in the room. A second later, headlights swept the bait shop windows. Then another pair, and another. Engines idled outside, too many for chance. Through the cracked blinds, Reed counted at least 4 vehicles, 2 unmarked SUVs and 1 city unit with the lights off. Men getting out, spreading, not a rescue team. A sweep. Lucia whispered, "They found us." Jasper slid one last icon onto the map, Tower 3, and looked up at Reed with an expression older than 10 years. Reed felt the whole board finally lock into place. Corrupted local channels, Marisol on a clock, Nate in custody, Odin in quarantine, hostile units at the door. No good options, only chosen risks. He pulled a burner phone from his go bag and started sending files. Micro SD mirror to state investigator, independent reporter, federal tip portal. Hands steady now that decision had replaced hope. Outside, a fist hammered the metal door. "Police! Open up!" Reed met Lucia's eyes, then Jasper's. "Back exit," he said. "Now." And in the hallway beyond the bait shop office, boots started running. "Back exit," he said. "Now." The bait shop office had a narrow service corridor that dumped into a reeking alley lined with crab traps and diesel drums. Reed shoved the rusted door open and ushered Lucia and Jasper through first, one hand on Jasper's backpack, the other on the pistol-grip flashlight clipped to his belt. Boots thundered in the hallway behind them. "Stop! Police!" No sirens, no warrant call-out, just force and momentum. Reed killed the alley light with a swing of the door so they dropped into shadow. Nate had once shown him 3 escape lines through this block. Muscle memory kicked in. Left past the ice machine, over the chain by the bait freezer, down to Pier C where cameras had died years ago and never been replaced. Lucia kept pace, breathing hard but steady, not asking questions. Jasper stumbled once, then recovered, teeth clenched, tablet thumping against his chest. At the fence, Reed boosted him over, then Lucia. He climbed last as a beam of white light washed the alley behind them. "There!" someone shouted. By the time officers reached the fence, Reed and his people were already cutting between stacked lobster pots and a refrigerated truck idling with its doors open. The harbor wind knifed through his jacket and brought brine, fuel, and the metallic scent of incoming rain. At Pier C, they ducked behind a rusted hoist. Reed checked his burner. Files transmitted, receipt pings from the state investigator, the reporter, and federal intake all stamped. Good. Not enough, but good. Lucia grabbed his sleeve. What now? Before he could answer, another number called. Officer Trin from Animal Control. He put it on speaker. Her voice came low and fast. They used my badge credentials to log Odin into quarantine under violent risk hold. That hold was not signed by the hearing officer. It came from the commissioner's office. Reed went still. Where is he? South Municipal Kennel Annex, Bay 4. They told me to sedate him if you appeared. You calling to warn me or arrest me? A beat. I'm calling because I watched that child beg through a car window while we took his dog. I have 2 sons. I can't unsee it. Reed looked at Lucia. She gave one sharp nod. Trin continued. You have 40 minutes before shift change. I can open Bay 4 once. After that, I never spoke to you. She disconnected. Nate's text came in at the same moment from an unknown jail release line. Out. Inventory tagged. Not booked into evidence yet. Meet point Delta. Reed exhaled once. Decision made. We get Odin. We get Nate. Then Tower 3. Lucia's eyes flashed. And Marisol. And Marisol. South Municipal Kennel Annex sat behind a public works yard and a chain-link fence topped with limp razor ribbon. Trin was waiting by a side gate in a rain shell. Face pale, hands shaking as she keyed the lock. I am risking my license, she whispered. Reed met her eyes. I know. She led them past barking runs into the quarantine wing. Bay 4 was concrete, steel, and fluorescent glare. Odin stood at the far end, muzzle off, leash clipped short to a ring bolt. He didn't bark when he saw Reed. He surged once, then held, chest vibrating with restrained energy. Reed crouched, palm to fur. Good hold, partner. Odin pressed his head hard into Reed's shoulder, then turned immediately to Jasper, checking him nose to knee. Jasper's fingers sank into his ruff like he was grabbing air after being underwater too long. Trin handed Reed a folded packet. Original interim order. Non-seizure still active. I pulled system logs showing override came from Commissioner Danner's terminal token. Lucia took the packet and slid it into a dry bag. Thank you. Trin swallowed. Bring that child's mother home. Nate rolled in 5 minutes later in a dented pickup, cheek split, wrists still ringed red from cuffs. He tossed Reed a hard case. They booked one drive, he said. Didn't find the body cam transmitter in my boot. Live relay still good. He looked at Jasper, then Odin, and gave a grim half-smile. Family's back together. Let's go ruin some legacies. Tower 3 rose unfinished over black water, 25 stories of concrete skeleton and glass that reflected storm clouds and work lights. Halbrook Marina. Phase 2 banners snapped on temporary rails. They parked 2 blocks out and moved on foot through a service lane, cluttered with rebar bundles and pallets of tile. Reed ran final checks. Odin harness cam active, Nate body cam active, burner stream mirrored to 3 endpoints. Lucia insisted on wearing one too. You stay with Jasper in stairwell cover, Reed said. No, Lucia answered. They took my sister. They threatened my nephew. I am done waiting outside doors. Reed held her gaze for a long second, then nodded. Stick to me. If I say down, you drop. If I say run, you run with Jasper. Understood. Jasper tapped his tablet and held it up. Together. Reed touched his shoulder once. Together. They entered through a loading bay with no guard. That worried Reed more than a guarded door. Too easy meant confidence or a trap already sprung. Odin led at heel until level 19. Then his nose snapped left toward the model unit corridor. Concrete dust coated everything. Plastic sheeting fluttered over unfinished door frames. A generator hummed somewhere above them. At 22, they stopped outside Unit 2207. Soundproof insulation foam lined the hall, muting the building's bones. Reed heard voices through the door, male, agitated. He raised 3 fingers. Stack. Nate took hinge side. Lucia and Jasper tucked behind an unfinished kitchen island across the hall. Odin went rigid, ears forward. Reed kicked in. The door slammed inward and chaos detonated. Blake Halbrook was by the windows, pistol in hand, surprised mid-turn. Evan Voss stood over a dining chair where Marisol was zip-tied, wrists swollen, tape at her mouth. Chase Danner had one hand inside a jacket, badge wallet already out like a talisman. "Police! Stand down!" Chase shouted, flashing the shield he had no authority to wield. "Drop it, Blake," Reed said, moving inside, centerline tight. "Now." Blake laughed, high and brittle. "You don't get to command me in my building." Nate angled right, camera chest forward. "Everything you say is live." Evan lunged for Marisol's chair, yanking her upright as a human shield. She cried out against the tape, eyes wild when she saw Lucia in the doorway. "Lucia!" Muffled, desperate. Lucia stepped in despite Reed's hand signal. I'm here, Mari." Chase pivoted toward her. "Get that woman out." He pulled something from his belt, an expandable baton, and came at Lucia. She didn't freeze. She grabbed an aluminum floor level from the unfinished counter and swung hard into his forearm. The baton clattered away. Chase cursed and backhanded her. She staggered, recovered, and spat blood at his shoes. "You don't get to touch us anymore," she said, voice raw and steady. Blake fired. The shot punched drywall inches from Reed's head. Reed moved on reflex, 2 strides, arm trap, wrist torque, driving Blake into a display wall. The pistol skidded under a sofa still wrapped in plastic. Blake fought dirty, raking at Reed's eyes, kneeing for groin, then biting when leverage failed. "Get off me," he screamed. "My father owns this city." "Not tonight." Reed slammed him face first to concrete and zip-cuffed one wrist. Across the room, Evans shoved Marisol's chair toward the balcony doors and bolted, with Jasper's cracked phone snatched from the table where he had demanded it be placed. "No evidence! No case!" he yelled, crashing through to the half-finished balcony. Nate went after him. Odin launched first. The balcony was slick with mist and open to a 22-story drop. Evans scrambled onto a stack of tile crates, winding up to hurl the phone into darkness. Odin hit him mid-throw, jaws locking on Evans' forearm with surgical precision. No tearing, just crushing hold and controlled weight driving him backward onto the concrete. Evans shrieked and flailed, phone bouncing once near the rail. Jasper darted forward on pure instinct. "Jasper, down!" Reed barked. Too late. Chase, bleeding from his lip, lunged from behind and grabbed Jasper by the hoodie, dragging him toward the railing. Lucia screamed and moved before anyone else, tackling Chase at the knees. Both slammed into a scaffolding post. Jasper twisted free and hit the deck, gasping. Nate kicked Chase's badge wallet over the edge and pinned him with a forearm across the throat. "You are not law," he hissed. Inside the unit, Marisol rocked the chair, trying to reach Lucia, tape streaked with tears. Blake bucked under Reed, snarling. "You think this sticks? My attorneys will bury you." Reed hauled him up by the cuffed arm and drove him against the window, making him face the cameras on Nate and Odin's harness. "Say it again," Reed said. "Say who told you to move opioid stock through a children's hospital." Blake's mouth snapped shut. Then radios crackled in the hall. Multiple units. Fast approach. Chase heard it and grinned through split lips. "Told you," he wheezed. "Told you he'd come." The antagonist wasn't done. Not even close. 3 city officers flooded the doorway with guns up. "Drop to your knees! Hands visible!" One officer recognized Chase and immediately shifted aim toward Reed. instead of the man pinning a child moments earlier. "Commissioner's son, you okay?" "Arrest Cooper," Chase shouted. "Kidnapping, assault, armed trespass." Nate rose slowly, hands wide, body cam pointed dead center. "Officers, this is an active kidnapping scene. Victim restrained inside. Multiple felonies recorded." The lead officer didn't even glance at Marisol. "I said knees." "Now." Reed read the room in half a second. Loyalists, not responders. If he complied blind, control of narrative snapped back to them. He pressed his earpiece twice, prearranged signal. Stream priority switched from buffered upload to live public relay on the reporter's channel. Somewhere in the city, this room just started broadcasting raw. Reed raised his voice so every mic caught it. "Officer, identify yourself and state why you are ignoring a bound victim and an armed suspect disarmed on camera." The officer hesitated. Tiny, human, then doubled down. "Shut it off." "Can't," Nate said pleasantly. "Cloud doesn't take requests." Blake used the distraction to wrench free and sprint for the hallway. Reed hooked his cuffed wrist, spun him, and sent him crashing into an unfinished drywall column. Chase elbowed Nate and made for the stairwell. Lucia, breath ragged, grabbed the discarded baton and jabbed it into Chase's ribs hard enough to fold him. He dropped, cursing, and she stood over him, shaking but unbroken. "You ran us out of every room," she said. "Not this one." On the balcony, Evan tried to peel Odin's jaws with his free hand, screaming for help. "Get this psycho dog off me!" Jasper crawled to the dropped phone, snatched it, and backed toward Marisol's chair. He held the device to his chest like a beating heart. Then another set of boots pounded the corridor, heavier, coordinated. Gray uniforms, not city blue. "State troopers! Weapons down!" Everything fractured at once. The city officers shouted over them. Chase screamed about jurisdiction. Blake tried to invoke his father's name. Evan wailed. Marisol kicked her chair onto its side to make herself impossible to ignore. Troopers took visual inventory with professional speed. Bound woman, injured child, firearm under furniture, 3 suspects restrained or actively resisted, multiple recording devices live. "City units, step back," the trooper sergeant ordered. "This scene is under state authority by Emergency Corruption Task Directive." Lead city officer protested. "You don't have—" The sergeant held up a tablet showing signed orders and federal tasking numbers. "I do now." He nodded once at Reed. "Mr. Cooper, release control. We've got it." Reed didn't move until he watched 2 troopers secure Blake and Chase in separate cuffs, and a medic cut Marisol free. Only then did he call Odin off. "Out." Odin released immediately and returned to heel, chest heaving, mouth blood-slick, but eyes clear. Evan curled around his arm, sobbing. "He maimed me. He maimed me." A trooper medic looked at the bite and said flatly, "He held. He didn't tear. You're lucky." Chase kept fighting even with wrists cinched. "My father will have your badges." The sergeant leaned in. "Your father is currently being detained at his office on conspiracy and obstruction. Save your voice for processing." For the first time all night, Chase went silent. Blake didn't. "This is political. We were negotiating. She's unstable. Ask the hospital." Marisol, tape finally off, stepped toward him with wrists bruised purple and voice like broken glass. "Say unstable again," she said in Spanish accent English. "Say it while they film your gun." Blake looked at the cameras, at the troopers, at the state seal on the warrant tablet, and the defiance drained just enough to show fear underneath. Evan started laughing, thin and panicked. "My mom can fix this. Inventory errors happen. We were helping—" "Helping who?" Nate snapped. "Developers buying waterfront after overdose deaths? Families you labeled nuisances?" Evan's laugh cracked into a sob. On a trooper's phone speaker, someone read out synchronized warrants. Blake Halbrook, Evan Voss, Chase Danner, kidnapping, conspiracy, evidence tampering, aggravated assault, narcotics diversion. Supplemental warrants pending for associated officials. Earned, not given. Dragged into the light, one refusal at a time. As they were marched out, Chase twisted to spit toward Reed's boots and missed by a foot. Blake kept shouting attorney names. Evan stared at Odin with naked hatred and terror. "Kill that dog," he hissed. Jasper, still shaking, stood up beside Odin and lifted his tablet with both hands. He had typed slowly, painfully, but he held it high so everyone saw. "He saved me." No one in that room could unsee it. The storm broke hard while statements were taken on site. Rain hammered exposed concrete and turned the tower lights into halos. In Unit 2207, now crowded with troopers, medics, and evidence techs, Marisol sat wrapped in a thermal blanket, while Lucia knelt in front of her, forehead pressed to forehead, both of them crying without sound at first, then with it. Jasper hovered 2 feet away, frozen between wanting to bolt and wanting to be held. Marisol opened her arms. He went to her in a single collision, tablet dropping, shoulders shaking as months of fear finally found somewhere to land. Odin lay against all 3 of them, a solid, warm line anchoring the pile of grief and relief. Reed stood at the window edge, blood drying at his temple from Blake's shot fragment, hands trembling now that there was space for it. Nate handed him a bottle of water and a look that was half concern, half old battlefield check-in. "You with me?" Reed nodded. "Yeah?" "Lie." Reed drank anyway. A state investigator in a rain-dark suit stepped over extension cords and introduced herself as Special Agent Priya Desai, Office of Public Integrity. "We got your file dumps 22 minutes before your live stream. Good redundancy." She took the encrypted drive from Lucia, logged it on camera, then held out a receipt form to Reed. "Chain is clean from this point." Reed signed, pen steady. Desai lowered her voice. "Your friend Nate's arrest is voided. We've got body cam of unlawful seizure and evidence interference. Also, animal control hold on Odin has been suspended pending formal review. Officer Trin filed an affidavit." Reed let out a breath he didn't know he'd been hoarding. Across the room, Detective Bell appeared in plain clothes, soaked through, eyes exhausted. He stopped 3 steps away from Reed like he wasn't sure he deserved to come closer. "You were right," Bell said quietly. "I thought I could contain it from inside. I was wrong." Reed watched him for a beat. "Then make it right from now." Bell nodded once. "I already gave Desai everything I sat on. Logs, calls, command pressure from Danner's office. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the first brick. By dawn, they were in a secure state facility giving formal statements. Marisol asked for Reed before she signed hers. He sat across from her in an interview room that smelled like coffee and copier heat, while Jasper dozed with Odin in the hall, cheek against the dog's flank. Marisol touched the trident tattoo on Reed's forearm with 2 careful fingers. "Miguel told me about this," she said in the Spanish. "He said a man with this mark carried him when he couldn't walk." Reed's throat tightened. "He carried us too." She shook her head. "He came home for a while. Long enough to meet my son. Long enough to tell me, if I was ever in danger, find Cooper." Her eyes filled. "He died later. Infection from old wounds. We had no money for the care he needed." The old guilt rose, hot and useless. Marisol saw it and squeezed his wrist. "No," she said firmly. "Do not do that to yourself. You did not abandon him. Systems did. Men like them did." Reed looked through the glass at Jasper's sleeping face and Odin's watchful profile. Promise reframed, not erased. By mid-morning, the city had changed temperature. The live stream clip was everywhere. So were the warrant lists. Outside the State Building, reporters shouted names that had once opened any door in Harbor Mercy. Now those names were being read beside words like indictment, conspiracy, corruption. Crisis mode didn't stop all at once. It loosened, one notch at a time. 3 nights later, after depositions and emergency hearings and exactly 2 hours of sleep in 40, Reed found Lucia on the roof of his training facility. The city glowed below in wet orange and white, harbor cranes blinking red like slow heartbeats. She stood in one of his spare hoodies, arms wrapped around herself against the wind. He handed her a mug of tea. She took it. Couldn't sleep either? He gave a humorless smile. I close my eyes. I see balcony rails. She nodded. I close mine. I hear that knock on the bait shop door. Silence sat comfortably for a minute. Not empty, just full. From below came the faint clink of Odin's tags and Jasper's tablet voice, practicing in the mat room with Marisol. Single words, then pauses, then again. Lucia stared out at the water. They offered me witness protection housing in another county. Anonymous school for Jasper. New names, if we wanted. Reed waited. I said no. She looked at him then, direct. I'm done disappearing to make room for other people's power. Something in his chest shifted. I keep thinking about what I told you, she went on, voice steadier than the tremor in her hands. That believing is expensive. It is. But not believing costs more. It costs this. She gestured toward the city, the cases, the bruises, the years. And I can't pay that anymore. Reed set his mug down on the parapet. Lucia, there's something I need to say before courage wears off. One corner of her mouth lifted. That sounds ominous. It probably is. He faced her fully. I spent years making sure nobody got close enough to need me. Easier to train dogs than trust people. Dogs don't lie, don't leave, don't ask you to be more than useful. She held his gaze without flinching. When Jasper said, Reed, maybe, I realize maybe is more honest than most promises I've heard. So here's mine. No speeches. I care about you. Deeply. I care about your family. Not because of Miguel, not because of guilt, not because I'm trying to atone for old failures. Because somewhere between deadbolts and court filings and you swinging a floor level at Chase Danner, I stopped picturing a life that ends at my kennel door. Lucia's breath hitched, barely. He kept going, voice rough now. I don't do this well. I get rigid when I'm scared. I go tactical when feelings would be smarter. I wake up mean from old memories. But if you can work with imperfect, I'm in. Not temporary. Not until this case settles. In. For a second, she just stared at him like she was translating a language she hadn't expected him to speak. Then she set her mug down with careful hands and stepped closer. I need you to hear mine too, she said. I am not easy. I test people because too many failed the test after promising forever. I go quiet when I'm hurt and sharp when I'm afraid. I will call you out when you try to carry everything alone like martyrdom is a virtue. A short laugh escaped him. Fair. I don't need a savior, she said. I need a partner who stays when it gets boring, not just dangerous. He nodded. I can do boring. We'll see, she said, and finally smiled for real. Then her expression softened. I love you, Reed. Not because you're strong, because you chose restraint when rage would have been easier. Because you looked at my nephew and saw a child, not a problem. Because you came back every day. The words landed like impact and shelter at once. He touched her face with a gentleness that would have surprised anyone who had only seen him in a fight. "I love you too." She leaned in first. The kiss was warm, deliberate, salt-sweet from wind and tears and tea. Not a cinematic crash, just two people deciding, in full knowledge of damage and history, to build anyway. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "So what does in look like?" He glanced toward the stairwell where laughter, actual laughter, rose from below. "It looks like you, Marisol, and Jasper taking the apartment upstairs as long as you want it. It looks like me learning not to call that temporary logistics. It looks like school runs and grocery lists and probably arguing about whether Odin is allowed on the couch. He's already on the couch. Traitor." She laughed softly, then grew serious. "No more, maybe?" He took her hand. "No more, maybe." The dangerous dog hearing was held in a municipal chamber that had never been this full for animal cases. Reporters lined the walls. Veterans from Reed's training program sat in the back row. Harbor Mercy staff, who had once avoided eye contact, now kept theirs fixed on the floor. Odin lay at Reed's left in a working harness, calm as carved wood. At the front, the hearing officer reviewed footage frame by frame. Fundraiser curb, SUV block, no bite, welfare stop seizure, compliant behavior, Tower 3 balcony, controlled apprehension, and release on command. "Based on evidence and expert testimony," the officer said into the mic, "this board finds Odin acted as a protective service animal under threat conditions. Petition to classify as dangerous is dismissed with prejudice." A murmur moved through the room like weather breaking. Jasper, seated between Lucia and Marisol, lifted his speech tablet. He had practiced this for 2 days. His finger hovered, then pressed. The device spoke in its clear synthetic voice. "Good dog." Odin's ears flicked toward him and his tail thumped once, precise and proud. Outside on the courthouse steps, a city council member read a prepared statement announcing hero citations for civilian responder Reed Cooper and K9 Odin, while 2 blocks away, federal agents carried boxes from Harbor Mercy administrative offices under sealed audit orders. By afternoon, charges stacked publicly. Blake Halbrook, Evan Voss, Chase Danner, kidnapping, conspiracy, narcotics diversion, tampering. Commissioner Danner, Halbrook Sr., and multiple associated officials, obstruction, corruption, coercion, hospital procurement and contract staff, fraud and evidence destruction. No one called it a misunderstanding anymore. That evening, rain-washed light slanted through the windows of the apartment above Reed's training facility. Marisol unpacked mugs into a cabinet, while Jasper taped a hand-drawn sign to Odin's crate. Safe room. Lucia stood at the stove making arroz con pollo because people heal better when fed, and Nate arrived carrying 2 grocery bags and a ridiculous stuffed lobster for Jasper that instantly became Odin's new contraband toy. Reed came up last, setting a small frame on the shelf by the door, a photo of Miguel Ruiz in desert sun, squinting, alive. Marisol touched the frame, then touched Reed's trident tattoo again. No words needed. Later, as dusk deepened, they walked together to the waterfront promenade for a small Harbor Mercy community event, rebooted under state oversight. No champagne spectacle this time. Just folding tables, coffee urns, and a local youth band trying hard. A little girl dropped her balloon when Odin passed. It skittered toward the curb. Odin moved, fast enough to make 3 bystanders gasp, then stopped at the edge of the street, body angled between traffic and the child, until she retrieved the string. He looked back to Reed for release. "Good God," Reed said. No one screamed. People watched, understood, and lowered their phones. Jasper stepped to Odin's side, one hand on his neck, the other on his tablet. He typed, then held the screen up where Reed and Lucia could see. Together. Safe. Behind them, harbor lights came on one by one, reflecting off dark water where fear had once swallowed voices whole. In the glow, with family at his shoulder and a promise finally kept in the open, Reed nodded. Yeah, buddy, he said. Together.